Okay, on the Paul Ryan for Speaker of the House situation, this remains fluid, and it remains somewhat murky, a little confusing. Here is the latest that I had in a drive-by media about this. Reuters' story is Paul Ryan announces candidacy for House Speaker. Officially jumped into the race for Speaker on Thursday after nailing down crucial endorsements from conservative and moderate factions. They quote Paul Ryan as saying, "I believe that we are ready to move forward as one united team, and I'm ready and I'm eager to be our Speaker." Now, folks, I want to remind you, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, I should have done this before starting into this. Let me set this up again. Just a belief. I mean, I can't prove any of this, but it's just it's based on what I've learned over the years here and combining that with my natural instincts. So I don't believe that what we hear from day to day really just to spontaneously happen that day in all cases. And this Paul Ryan for Speaker circumstance, I think, has been managed behind the scenes long before anybody ever first heard of it. And I think that there is an objective to it. The donor class wants what the donor class wants, and the donor class is not going to be denied. They give that money to these people for a reason. And they give that money to these people in part to make sure the elections don't matter if they don't have to matter. The money is given as an insurance against you and how you vote. Now, we know what the big Republican donors want. That's been reported. They want, among other things, amnesty. They want comprehensive immigration reform. The Democrat donors want it too. The two sets of donors supposedly have different reasons for wanting it, but both parties want it. The Democrats want amnesty. Obviously, it's a voter registration drive for them, and it maintains their permanent underclass that they need of people constantly in need, constantly dependent, and willing to vote for Santa Claus to satisfy their dependence. The Republican side of this is oriented toward big money donors who, it is said, want to be able to hire people and pay them as little as possible. Cheap labor. It kind of that goes against everything that we as Republicans stand for and believe. We believe just the opposite, that being paid well is a direct result of working hard and how much you prepare, desire, ambition, and all of that. And now we find out that our own party seems to be working with people to sabotage that whole notion in exchange for a job pool that's basically unskilled and in many ways uneducated and therefore unable to demand high compensation. So that side's that's contradictory for us conservatives and Republicans. Think that we have people on our side that are oriented that way. We have always believed that the Democrats are into people earning as little as possible because they end up becoming dependent. And then we find out so much has been stood upside down and on its head. We now know the Democrat Party is the party of the rich. The Democrat Party is the party protecting the rich, particularly the financial market rich and the Hollywood rich and the Wall Street rich. And yet the Republicans continue to be blamed for only caring about the rich. So you put all that in a hopper. You know what the donor class wants. We know, and it's not just illegal immigration. We also know that the donor class wanted the Iran deal because they want Iran as a market. They didn't like sanctions being placed on Iran because Iran is in need of modernizing a number of things, like its national airline. They're using age-old equipment. When they were under sanctions, they couldn't buy any replacement aircraft or anything else legally, not just for their nuclear program, but anything. So we came to find out some airplane manufacturers were very happy to see the Iran deal happen because it lifted sanctions. And the lifting of sanctions immediately provided the Iranian regime with $150 billion. Not all of it may be spent on financing terrorism. Some of it might be spent to buy new airplanes or new cars, buses, whatever the hell it is. So we find the Republicans didn't stand in the way in the Iran deal either. In fact, they came up with a corker bill that was designed to make it look like they were putting up obstacles, but in fact they weren't. So when we know all of that, much as it's hard to digest and as difficult as it is to accept, we know all of that. Then we are treated to John Boehner supposedly getting frustrated and saying, no mas, getting out of there. And now we've got supposedly a crisis. Oh, my God, who's going to be the next speaker? And then one day, we're told Paul Ryan. And my only point is that it didn't happen that way. Washington news is a script. Washington politics is a script. It is written. The people in Washington, in the media and in the political parties, those that are famous and have a role in talking and reaching the public, they have roles to play. And the short version of this is that I think, Ryan had these two demands. And I think these demands were dealt with long before anybody ever heard about them. His demand was that he be elected unanimously by the Republican caucus. He didn't want any disagreement, and that was to further unity. And the second thing he wanted was to eliminate the House rule written by Thomas Jefferson that speakers can be recalled. And the third thing, he didn't want to have to travel on weekends. He wanted to be able to maintain his time with his family. Now, that was presented to us in one day. My contention is this was all done days and maybe a week prior. The negotiations, the expressive Paul Ryan telling people what his demands were, people approaching him to do this. And that processes were put in place to make those things happen. So that takes us to this. Well, now let me close the loop on it. Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Here's the dream from the Republican donor side. The Republican donor side is that Jeb Bush, or if not Jeb, somebody else acceptable to the Republican establishment gets elected president. Paul Ryan is Speaker of the House. And the donor class thinks that if they can make that happen, that within 12 to 18 months, their entire agenda will be implemented. And that's why Trump is a problem. And that's why Ben Carson is a problem. Because either Trump or Carson put an obstacle in the way of the agenda happening. And I think it takes a while to write that script. I think it takes a while to put all these pieces in play. And by the time the news is reported to us that Ryan is going to be Speaker but has these demands, I think it's already been dealt with. We're just not told that. Now, the latest news is that Ryan has offered concessions to the House Freedom Caucus. This would be the conservatives or the Tea Party caucus in the House of Representatives. And here they are. Ryan has agreed to delay a discussion about reforming the procedural motion used to remove a House Speaker. He has not eliminated it, according to Politico. He has agreed to delay discussion, meaning he's open to taking the job without the guarantee that that procedural motion would be eliminated. Okay, now, hold your horses. Given what I've just said, is that really what's going on, or is that just what the soap opera tells us? Is that just what the script is? You have to ask yourself this. Paul Ryan is approached to be Speaker. He says, only if, and lists 3 things. Those 3 things are announced, and a firestorm erupts. A couple days later, we get this story. Well, he's willing to delay this provision that would do away with the procedure for getting rid of a speaker. Why? Why? If he must really want the job then. I mean, the demands were what they were, and now with just a little bit of opposition or anger, he's willing to back off of one of them? Why? Is he really backing off of it? Or is there another way that perhaps they can get this done while it appears he's walking away from it? I mean, the demand is what it was. The demand is outrageous that he be voted for unanimously and that they get rid of the rule that says they can get rid of speakers. But yet he's willing to compromise on that? Why? What happened? What changed? Did it look like he wasn't going to be supported? And I thought he didn't want it anyway unless he could get all that. So what happened? Why back off of this? Then you ask yourself, is he really backing off of it, or is that just the news? And then you have to ask yourself one other thing about all this. You know, there's a whole other party in the House that votes on these things that we're not hearing a thing about. Where are the Democrats on this provision that you can't get rid of a speaker? It's just been assumed because the Democrats are in the minority, they got nothing to say about it. But the Democrats know that someday they're going to be in the majority. They're going to want to be saddled with this suspension of the rule that allows members to recall a speaker. This is very, very strange to me. You make the demand, and it's made almost as a non-negotiable thing. It's made it's a demand almost of somebody that really does not want the job. But if you're going to make me take it, you're going to have to do this, this, and this. Otherwise, I'm not interested. This is a list of demands you make that you don't expect to get. And on that basis, you say, okay, thanks, but no thanks, I don't want the job. But then all of a sudden, no, he does want the job. He really wants to be speaker, and he's willing to back off of that for a while. Yeah, well, until when? No, I'm sorry. I'm just unable to temper. I'm naturally skeptical here. That's all this is. I don't know anything. I'm just skeptical. Intelligence guided by experience. And then there's this story at Hill.com. Groups seeking to curb immigration, or group seeking to curb immigration, goes after Ryan. A leading advocate of tighter restrictions on immigration has launched a campaign to prevent Paul Ryan from assuming the speakership. Numbers USA, which advocates for tougher laws governing both legal and illegal immigration, is warning that Ryan's past embrace of certain legalization benefits for people in the country illegally, benefits that critics deem to be amnesty, make him unfit for the post. So we see that it isn't universal acclaim, yet people want it to appear that it is. Anyway, it's just very, very fluid out there. This whole situation where we're trying to replace Boehner, and I just can't help but wonder if, as is the usual case, there's more going on here than we know that is not being reported, but that is known. Quick timeout. Open Line Friday. We'll get to your calls next.